What if Natsu was a lightning dragon slayer? Chapter 8. Mountains surrounded him. The jagged, sky-high scars of the earth were covered with snow at their peaks, and had large, gray clouds looming over them. A powerful blizzard blew by, making visibility positively dismal. However, he could see with night perfection. He stood over a precipice, a large, dark, yet oddly warm cavern behind him. Perhaps it was the warmth of the cloak. Perhaps it was the warmth of his body. He didn't know with exactitude. The high-collared, tattered black cloak fluttered wildly with the harrowing winds, a feat mimicked by his waist-length, spiky dark blue hair. His sharp, emerald draconic gaze settled onto the gray skies, watching every sliver of movement they made. His arms were crossed over his chest, emphasizing the elaborate dark blue markings that traversed his arms, identical in color to his hair. The biting cold stung against his skin, wanting to bring his body to hypothermic temperatures, with little success. The relatively negligible amounts of magical energy he would infuse into his body, aided by his draconian physiology, would prevent such an event from happening. It was the only thing he liked about being a dragon, apart from the immense power he held. Those overgrown lizards were sparsely affected by the elements of Mother Nature, no matter what element they wielded. Though, they still preferred to loiter within those locations, out of sheer habitual instinct. The cold, snowy mountains were his preference. He honestly enjoyed living in seclusion, away from the insects that he begrudgingly shared species classification. No, he was more than that. He was no filthy human. He was a dragon, but not an ordinary one. Oh, no, he was far more than that. He was the king of them all, the most powerful dragon to ever soar the beautiful blue skies of Earthland, the dragon that struck fear in the hearts of dragons themselves. The harbinger of doom, the black dragon of the apocalypse, Acnologia. He was a god amongst the puny insects that inhabited the world, and his abilities emphasized that greatly. No being had even come close to providing him a challenge. Not even that dragon of lightning he fought 100 years ago, whose name he remembered not, gave him much of a challenge, and it was considered one of the strongest amongst dragonkind. It was a complete, utter disappointment. The only ones who could actually challenge his power were those two, though they were, currently indisposed. He often wondered if he was going to stagnate at the top of the world, with the little bugs living in fear of an attack by him. Sure, one of the insects' settlements developed the gall to hunt him and attempt to erase his existence, though the end result was laughable. It was a complete, one-sided annihilation, truly befitting of his epithet. He turned around, the dark cloak flourishing as he entered the eerily quiet orifice he called a temporary shelter. He took idle notice of the considerably sized bonfire that lit the otherwise impenetrably dark cave, and the well-sized, thoroughly cooked leg of a blizzardvern he killed while scaling up the mountain. Slightly licking his lips in hunger, he tore off a portion of the meat and devoured it quickly. Sitting down on a rather rounded boulder, he fell into his thoughts, bringing them back to the past night. He felt it. As minute as it was, he felt it. The dark energy he instantly related to a being far too familiar to him had emerged somewhere in the northern lands of Fiore, yet disappeared a few minutes later. It almost left the feeling that it was a mere figment of his imagination. But it wasn't. It was real, so very real. The only other being he honestly respected was out there, somewhere in the diverse lands of the Ishgarian Peninsula. Now, he would wait until the energy manifested once more. No matter how long it took, he would wait patiently. He smirked, showcasing his deadly sharp fangs. Finally back. Deegan. Clover Town. It was a place bustling with activity, even in the nighttime hours. Rare were the occasions when small amounts of people would walk through the streets, trying to get to their intended destination as fast as they could. Today was no different. In fact, it seemed that the streets were fuller than what was accustomed, with a greater number of foreigners visiting the town. Considering the fact that the day was quickly going into its final vestiges, it was a somewhat surprising change of pace for the inhabitants. But it did little to bother them. In fact, they embraced it, seeing it as a boost in the town's economy. This was the sight that greeted Gildarts and the children. They ambled through the nigh overbearing crowds, with Natsu tightening his grip on Urza and Kagura's hands, his protective instincts flaring. Both girls reciprocated the action readily, with Urza casting distrusting glances towards a few sections of the crowd. They fidgeted in the new clothes that Gildarts had bought them, wondering how he had managed to get the clothes during the small break they took before arriving at Clover Town. Gildarts followed close behind them, his eyes settled on them like a hawk, idly wondering just what was happening for so many people to be walking down the street. There was no meeting of the guild masters that he knew of. Perhaps it was a festival of some sort? If it was no fantasia. The people of Magnolia really knew how to party during that particular festival, largely thanks to Fairy Tale's participation. He looked up into the air, noticing the dark silhouettes of the mountain range that surrounded the town. High, jagged pieces of earth that scarred the landscape, unflinchingly facing the ravages of Mother Nature without bending ever so slightly. Protecting the town itself, he subconsciously wanted to see himself as that for the 3 survivors of Rosemary Village. Sure, he just met them a few hours ago, but the sheer horror they faced compelled him to think like that. Was it parental instinct? Perhaps, considering that the children lost everything they held dear in that village, except themselves. Yet, how could he call it that? He didn't know what it meant to be a father, so how could he have parental instinct? Of one thing he was sure, though, these children were going to be the answer to those questions, for he already felt fiercely protective of them. He wouldn't dare let them out of his sight. Noticing a rather small and quiet hotel, he reached out and grabbed Natsu's shoulder, prompting the children to stop dead in their tracks. Thankfully, the crowds thinned out when they left the center of town, so much so that they were the only people on the street by the time they arrived at the hotel's entrance. "Hey, kids, how about we stop here for the night?" he asked. A silent nod was the only answer he received. "All right, cool. I'll get 2 rooms. One for me, and one for you 3. Sound good? Another set of nods. He was getting a little worried about the silence. He couldn't fault them, though. Recovery was months, maybe years, away from them, so he couldn't expect them to be talkative mere hours after the incident. In fact, he would not be offended if they declared their distrust towards him, even after taking them away from the village ruins. They walked in the hotel, taking notice of the humility it portrayed by the small amount of decorations displayed. "Good evening," greeted the clerk, a middle-aged man with graying hair that wore formal clothing. "How may I help you this glorious evening?" The man was happy, that much was obvious. "I would like to have 2 rooms, please. Preferably next to each other," stated Gildarts. The man nodded, reaching under the front desk and retrieving 2 tagged keys with the numbers 256 and 257. "You're in luck, my friend. Today's one of the busiest days of the year." "Completely booked," exclaimed the elder man. "In fact, these 2 rooms are the only ones I have left." "Phew, that went well," Gildarts thought in relief. "I sure as hell did not want to spend the next few hours looking for a place to sleep." "All right, we'll take those. How much is it?" 2,000 jewels apiece per night," replied the man. Nodding, Gildarts dug into his cloak and removed a few white bills with a grayish outline. "Here ya go," said he, placing the bills on the counter and snatching up the keys. "Splendid. I hope you 4 enjoy your stay at the Clovermore Hotel." A raised hand was what Gildarts deemed an appropriate response for the cheery old man. Beckoning the still silent children to follow him, he ascended up the stairs into the second floor, emerging in a small, well-lit hallway with a multitude of doors on both sides. "Here ya go, kids," began Gildarts when they arrived at their hotel rooms, handing one of the keys to Natsu. "If you need anything, don't hesitate to ask, even if you have to wake me up for it." "All right. The children nodded once again, entering the hotel room with a collectively whispered goodnight that made him smile. It was not much, but it sure as hell was better than nothing. Breathing in relief, Gildarts watched them walk into the room, opening his when he heard the click of the door locking. He locked his own door, disrobing as he walked to his bed. In a rather exaggerated manner, he jumped on it, landing with his hands under his head. Spartan as it was, the room had a damn comfortable bed. Reminiscing was all that he did for what seemed like an eternity. Old man Rob was dead. The statement struck him like a sledgehammer, unleashing a torrent of grief that was only surpassed by the despair of his dear Cornelia's death. He had an endless amount of memories with the deceased wizard, going as far back as his childhood. The man was like a father to him, helping him find the right path after his biological parents were killed. Like a tsunami, the memories came raging forth, overwhelming him with emotions. He never noticed a lone tear trailing down his cheek. "Rest in peace, old man." Silence reigned in room 256 of the Clovermore Hotel. It almost seemed as if the children lost the ability to speak. It was understandable, of course. There existed no words to fully describe the state the three children were in. Though, it was far more apparent in the two older ones. "Natsu," whispered Urza, breaking the spell of silence. I'm sorry, Urza." The sudden interruption surprised her, for she thought the pink-haired dragon slayer was stuck in his thoughts as he was hours before. "Sorry? For what?" Confusion was obvious in her answer. What could Natsu be sorry about? "I'm sorry, for scaring you, for not being able to protect you, for being so weak." She was speechless. She couldn't muster a single thought, much less a single syllable to respond to that apology. How could she respond to that? "No more." The ominous edge his tone took startled her, as well as Kagura. Unconsciously, the purple-haired girl inched closer to the redhead, gripping her shirt like a lifeline. She looked at the dragon slayer with uncertainty. He wheeled towards them, startling them again, though they managed to mask it. "I promise you, Urza, Kagura, that I will protect you with my life. I will no longer be weak." The spell of speechlessness gripped the girls even tighter, the raw emotion embedded in his words completely overwhelming them. "I will become the strongest." They felt it. His aura, his passion, his power was fluctuating as if further cementing his promise. For minutes, the girls stared at him, awestruck. They just didn't have the mental faculties to respond to such a passionate declaration. They gasped when they felt his thin, yet strong arms envelop them in a powerful embrace. Returning the embrace with equal fervor, they basked in the warmth and protective feelings that only he seemed to emanate. Inwardly, they vowed the same thing. They would not allow Natsu to reach the pinnacle of power alone. They would be there, right beside him, growing stronger so they, too, could protect him. When they released each other, their eyes fell upon the only bed in the room. Communicating with just their side, Natsu climbed on the bed first, settling in the middle. The girls quickly followed, Urza settling to the left of him, and Kagura to the right. Almost in complete synchronization, they laid their heads on him in an eerily similar fashion to the way they fell asleep after the invasion ended. "Good night," whispered Natsu, his eyes drooping shut. The girls snuggled deeper into his chest, feeling their consciousness slip into the realm of Morpheus. "Good night." The hall was dark and grim, constructed of large black bricks, sparsely lit by torches that were very separated from each other. She passed a multitude of doors, all of them leading to different sections of the castle. Such was the architecture of their home. She enjoyed the foreboding feeling that it emanated, for it allowed the area to remain undisturbed by any adventurer who found it by chance. Her magic aided in that regard. She couldn't wait for her beloved to regain his former power that rivaled even Acnologia's. At the current pace, though, it would take well over 100 years for that to happen, especially if he remained within the vessel he inhabited. She couldn't wait that long, no, she wouldn't. 400 years she had waited for his return. She would wait no longer. She was going to aid him in regaining his strength, in a way, she thought, was sublimely ingenious. She couldn't help the small, triumphant smile that appeared on her beautiful face. Her beloved would return, more powerful than ever before, she would make sure of that. Her smile grew when she arrived at her destination, a door at the very end of the hall, larger than all the other doors she passed. She didn't even knock. Walking in as if the place belonged to her, she was greeted by a room even darker than the hallway, with only one candle shining in the middle of it. She could sense a presence within it, an evil presence. Well, that would be how a normal human would describe it, but for her, it was intimately familiar. How she missed that presence, a presence she hadn't felt for a very long time. "Greetings, Naomi," she spoke, stepping closer to the candle. Sounds of movement rang in response to her greeting, though she remained unfazed. "Such a long time, yet no more than a letter from you," spoke a slightly raspy voice, distinctly female. "How cruel you are, mother. Situations were unfavorable, Naomi, rendering me unable to visit," Naomi's mother replied evenly, running her hand through her hair. "Ha! That's a lame excuse if I've ever heard one," retorted Naomi's voice, a hint of amusement present. Her mother ignored the statement, focusing on the slit blood-red eyes that shone in the dark. "Do you know why I am here, Yes, but I dare not hope without confirmation." "Is it him?" Naomi asked softly. "Yes, my daughter, it is him. Your father has returned to this world." "What's our next move?" Naomi swiftly inquired, excitement palpable in her tone. "We wait. Of all the responses she expected from her mother, Naomi did not expect that. She tried to articulate words for a few seconds, failing miserably. What? Are you serious? Wait," she intoned after almost half a minute. "Haven't we waited enough, perhaps, but the situation calls for this course of action," Naomi's mother replied. "How long must we wait, then?" There was exasperation in Naomi's voice. "About 100 years, What, 100 years? That's prep." "If, and only if, he is left to his own devices," Naomi's mother cut her off, a firm edge in her tone. "What do you mean? I don't." "Oh," spluttered Naomi, before bursting into soft, angelic peals of laughter. "Oh, you are devious, mother. When do we begin?" "As soon as possible, of course. We want to ensure his return to power remains uninterrupted," responded Naomi's mother. "Very well. I will do anything in my power to assist you, mother," Naomi declared, enthusiasm emanating from her voice. "For my father, yes, my dear, for your father," her mother declared softly, a smile growing steadily. "Yes, my beloved, you will return to us, to our arms, to our love. I promise, and this is Magnolia, the home of fairy tale." Natsu and the girl seemed somewhat unenthusiastic at Gildart's boastful declaration of his guild's hometown. However, it wasn't because of the fact that they were unenthusiastic. In fact, it was the complete opposite. They were awestruck by the size of the town. It was almost twice as large as Clover Town, if the amazing view was anything to go by. People were milling about the streets, going through their daily routines with the brightest of smiles. There were little inhabitants on the other side of the spectrum of emotion, mainly visible in one of the commercial stands, where a vendor and a customer were arguing about something they could not discern. Well, what do you think? Asked Gildarts, looking at the children expectantly. It's great, answered Natsu, a response further supported by the nods of the girls. Well, I'm glad you like it, he responded. Now, we should go to my house as stealthily as possible. Don't want people noticing me and make the mayor call the Gildarts shift, now do we? The Gildarts shift? Asked Urza curiously. Gildarts chuckled, it's something the town mayor devised, since I tended to smash through things when I returned from missions, he explained. Of course, I didn't have the control I currently have over my magic, and the accidents were getting more and more expensive, so the mayor decided on a long-term investment to prevent such things from happening. And so, the Gildarts shift was born. Kagura stared at Gildarts with something akin to awe, while Natsu and Urza looked at him with a deadpan expression. Hehe. Anyways, let's go to my house and rest a little bit, declared Gildarts. Why? Asked Kagura. Well, considering what you all went through a few days ago, I thought you would want to spend some time together, away from the bustle in the guild. Sure, you may have gone through Clover Town and its inhabitants, but you didn't make any prolonged contact with them, and in Fairy Tale, you will instantly be the new sensation. With the mere fact that you are children and you possess such great magic power. His reasoning was sound, Natsu decided, something the pink-haired dragon slayer was actually thinking about when they arrived. Looking at each other, the children were trying to decide whether they should accept or not. Urza shrugged, while Kagura looked confused, obviously trying to figure out the meaning of Gildarts' explanation. Sure, we'll go, Natsu responded, earning Kagura's attention. Gildarts nodded in response, smiling warmly at them. All right, then. Let's go. Grasping each other's hands tightly, the children followed Gildarts as he inconspicuously made his way through the crowd. It took the better part of 20 minutes to make their way through the town, for Gildarts had forgotten to inform the children that his home was on the other side of town, close to the guild. Well, that was easy, said Gildarts, pulling out a silver key from his pocket and opening the front door. After you. The children were surprised at the sheer simplicity that was Gildarts' house. Considering that he was a wizard, and a very powerful one at that, they expected it to be twice as large, and more ornately furnished. Did you expect something else? Asked the orange-haired man, noticing their quizzical expressions. They reluctantly nodded. Well, I've lived here for 7 years, and never saw a need for luxuries, just necessities. So yeah, this is the result. The children nodded once again, accepting the explanation. All right, continued Gildarts. Make yourselves at home. I'll go and let the master know I'm in town, as well as give him my report on my mission's success. Will you tell him about us? Asked Urza. If you want me to, then yes, responded Gildarts. Urza looked at Natsu, silently asking him for his opinion. The Dragon Slayer shrugged. No, please don't tell him, said Urza, after a few seconds of contemplation. Gildarts nodded, pulled out a couple bills, and handed them to the redhead. Here, some money for if I take long and you get hungry, he spoke. The children nodded thankfully. There's a restaurant west from here, to the left of the street. There's a large assortment of food there, so I'm sure you'll find something you like. Thank you, Gildarts, she said. No problem, kid, the orange-haired man replied. Well, I'll be off then. Without further ado, Gildarts left. Are you all hungry? Asked Natsu, seconds after the front door closed. The girls shook their head, earning a nod from the pink-haired dragon slayer. All right, then, he spoke, walking to the small dining room and sitting on a chair. Natsu, what are you doing? Asked Urza. I'm thinking about what we'll do now, he replied. Since we have nowhere to go, we'll probably end up joining Fairy Tale, like Gildarts said. But, I'm not sure, what do you mean? Inquired Urza again. Natsu shrugged. I promised that I would protect you both, that I would grow stronger. And I know that joining Fairy Tail will help me with that, but, after what happened, I don't feel like I can trust people anymore. I know what you mean, she replied, nodding. After what that bastard did to her, she sure as hell would not allow a boy to touch her. Well, except Natsu. She couldn't help the minuscule blush that bloomed as a result of the final thought. Why not do it? Piped up Kagura suddenly. Do what? Asked Natsu, looking at her quizzically, a look the redhead shared. Why not join Fairy Tail? She elaborated. We can see if they're nice people, and if they are, we stay. The elder children mulled over the suggestion for a few seconds, smiling afterwards. They were surprised at the sheer simplicity, yet ingenuity, of Kagura's suggestion. Join Fairy Tail and see if they were any good. If they were, they would stay. If they weren't, they would simply leave. It was just so simple. How did they not see that? Yeah, you're right, Kagura. We should do that, whispered Natsu, Urza nodding her support. Yeah, Kagura continued excitedly. That way, we can get stronger and protect you too. Now that left Natsu surprised. The statement wasn't the culprit, though. It was the sentiment, the still extant innocence in Kagura's tone. He could only smile at that, though the shocks did not end. That's right, Natsu, began Urza. Not only will you be growing stronger. I will grow as strong as you will, so I can protect you too. But no buts, Natsu, you won't stop me, declared the redhead. I will do whatever it takes to grow as strong as you, because you are my rival and my best friend. I will do whatever it takes to stand beside you in power. The level of surprise Natsu felt only grew with Urza's statement. He could only smile at the sheer emotion they portrayed, Urza with fiery determination, Kagura with innocent determination. However, what happened next shocked the children greatly. A bright flash of light ensued, blinding them for a few moments. The light then morphed into something far too familiar to the pink-haired dragon slayer, the chest holding the fire dragon lacrima he received from Raggio. What's going on, he thought, nonplussed. What is the meaning of this? Raggio never told me about this. He then looked at Urza, his eyes widening greatly as he realized the implications. Is she the one, Natsu, what's going on? Urza asked, confused and a little frightened by the sudden appearance of one of Natsu's chests. I don't know, Urza. This chest has never done that before. I mean, I didn't even feel my magic being used, Natsu replied, as confused as her. He warily approached the chest, running his hand over the primary seal that locked it, releasing some of his magic. Locking seal, release, calling out the incantation taught to him by Raggio, he watched as the seal shone momentarily before fading into non-existence. Opening the chest, he was greeted by a sight he never saw before. The fire dragon lacrima was glowing, bathing the room in a crimson light that seemed to emanate generous amounts of heat. Minutes passed, with the children staring at the lacrima with wide eyes. Natsu was racking his brain, trying to figure out just why the chest appeared so suddenly. His reverie was so powerful he didn't hear Kagura's gasp. Urza, Kagura's startled tone finally snapped him out of his reverie. He turned around, only to watch as Urza slowly stepped towards the lacrima, almost as if she were possessed. Her eyes were glossy, and her mouth slightly agape. She had her hands extended towards the shining magical object, her intentions clear. She wanted to grab it. Without thinking, Natsu snapped the chest shut, ceasing the bath of crimson light and heat that apparently entranced Urza. What? Stuttered Urza, her mind struggling to catch up with the situation. What happened, why you were in a trance, Urza, said Natsu. Her eyes grew wide. What? How? Why? Was all Urza could say. It was the lacrima. I don't know why it glowed. It just did, spoke Natsu, unable to think of an explanation for the lacrima's glowing. And you were walking towards it like a zombie. I was. A compendium of emotions raged through the 8-year-old redhead, indiscernible amongst her shock. Yes, Raggio never told me about it glowing. He only told me that I would know. The person must have a very high affinity for fire magic, show great potential both as a person and a wizard, and be willing to take the pain of becoming a dragon slayer. Raggio's words rang in his mind, reminding him of the prerequisites for being considered worthy of receiving the lacrima. However, he couldn't help but think that they were oddly vague. Such prerequisites were far too simple, and could apply to a huge number of people. How was he going to know who the worthy recipient was? The glowing, Natsu concluded. The glowing tells me who is truly worthy. It's gotta be the glowing, and it only made Urza go into a trance. Urza's the one. I found her, Raggio whispered Natsu, mystifying the girls. He startled them when he suddenly looked up and locked eyes with the redhead. She couldn't help but take a few steps back, unnerved by the piercing stare she was receiving. Why, you're the one, spoke Natsu shakily. And Natsu, what are you saying? Asked Urza, just as shakily. He turned towards the chest, pointing it with his finger, before turning to her again. Urza, that lacrima contains fire dragon slayer magic, stated Natsu. Urza's eyes widened considerably. Before he died, Raggio gave me a job. He told me to find a worthy recipient of the lacrima, and that I would know when I found him her. Wait, interrupted Urza. So you're saying the lacrima glowing must have been that sign that let me know who was worthy. It just has to be it. You're the one, Urza. This lacrima has chosen you. Urza was speechless, her befuddled mind unable to process the situation. She couldn't even trust her hearing. Was Natsu saying what she was saying? He possessed a lacrima full of dragon slayer magic that just happened to be her exact affinity? And it chose her of all people? It was ridiculous. Never in her life had she imagined such a thing happening to her. But it was happening to her. New possibilities burst forth from within the confines of her mind. The lacrima had chosen her, meaning she had the opportunity to become a dragon slayer like Natsu. Living with him for 4 months taught her one thing: dragon slayers were powerful, extremely powerful. As a child, having magical reserves larger than full-fledged S-class wizards was something incredible. To be able to use those magical reserves to level a whole village and part of the forest in just a few spells was something only found in her wildest dreams. Now, that power was in front of her, bringing forth a thought, no, a desire, that she had buried in the back of her mind due to the situation. Ever since she witnessed Natsu's immense power, she wanted to become a dragon slayer, thinking it was the only way she could ever hope to match him. However, the moment that desire was born, she stomped it down due to the impossibility of such a thing happening. Now, out of sheer coincidence, apparently, the opportunity to become such a mage was in front of her, and she sure as hell was not going to let it go. Urza, spoke Natsu, snapping her out of her thoughts. She looked at him, idly wondering when she had looked away. Would you like to become a dragon slayer like me? She wanted to jump forth and say yes, but, oddly, something held her back. Oh, she could hear the excitement in his voice when he asked that question, something that excited her to no end. But, a question ran through her mind, curbing her excitement somewhat. Just how was the lacrima supposed to transform her into a dragon slayer? She contemplated the question, wondering whether she should ask her best friend, or not. She even wondered whether she should accept the offer, believing it all to be a dream of some sort. Urza, spoke Natsu hesitantly, reaching out to the redhead. She snapped out of her reverie, locking eyes with the pink-haired dragon slayer. The sincerity in his eyes stomped out any modicum of a notion that the entire thing was an elaborate prank, or that the lacrima containing fire dragon slayer magic was just falsity. Yes, his eyes told the truth that small lacrima possessed the power to make her into the most powerful kind of mage she had ever seen in her short 8 years of life. She reaffirmed the decision she already made minutes past. She was going to accept it, for him, for Kagura, for Grandpa Rob. I want to, Natsu, she spoke, her eyes fraught with determination. I want to be a dragon slayer like you. I want to grow as strong as you, so I can protect you. The ethereal crimson glow of the lacrima shone from within the chest, bathing the room in its warm embrace. She truly is the one Ragio talked about, thought Natsu. Urza, he began. Ragio told me that becoming a dragon slayer like this hurts. Is that okay? It seemed so far away from her. The lacrima was once again calling upon her, somewhat entrancing her once again. She understood what he said, but it just seemed so dim. She was willing to take whatever pain necessary to grow stronger. That was clear within her mind. Besides, there were worse kinds of pain, some that she experienced far too recently. I don't care, she whispered in a monotone. I'll do it. Natsu stared at her, a smile growing on his face, before nodding. Thank you, Urza, he spoke softly. You have no idea how much that means to me. However far they were, the redhead heard the words as clear as day. Even in her semi-entranced state, a smile made itself known. Natsu opened the chest once more, carefully grasping the lacrima. He marveled at the fact that, contrary to the powerful aura of warmth it emitted, the object was rather cool to the touch. He inspected the house for a comfortable place for her to lie down. Noticing the rug in the living room, he gestured for her to lie down. Kneeling beside her, Natsu carefully placed the object on her midsection, growing astonished as the lacrima glowed brighter, and released greater warmth. He also took notice of how Urza held the lacrima reverently, as if it were the holiest thing in the world. Urza, get ready, he announced. At her nod, he placed his hands on the lacrima, recalling the words Ragio used to infuse his own lacrima into him. Fusionerm lacrimum. Instantly, the crimson object began to sink into Urza. She winced slightly, feeling the incredible amount of extremely powerful magic beginning to flood her body. It was indescribable. She felt as if fire was spreading from her midsection to the very tips of her fingers, her toes, and her head. Warmth she never felt before coursed through her. She felt her body changing, adapting to the magic. Never was she prepared for what came after. The moment the lacrima sunk entirely into her body, searing pain exploded from within her. Her mouth fell agape in a silent scream of agony, the previously comfortable warmth mutating into a blazing inferno that threatened to overwhelm her. Finally unable to endure it, she unleashed a harsh, tormenting wail, tightly gripping the rug below her. Tears flowed from her eyes as she contorted multiple times, futilely attempting to lessen her pain. Through her blurred vision, she saw crimson flames begin to rise from her body, covering her in a fiery aura that grew in intensity. Erza, that was Kagura, and she sounded so helpless, so scared, so distant. Kagura, get away. Get out of here, she heard Natsu shout, or was it a whisper? She couldn't discern, the pain was too great. Somewhere within the confines of her pain-riddled mind, she felt arms embrace her, and heard a cry of agony. It was Natsu. Darkness was beginning to overtake her, though she could make out the slowly charring skin and hair of her rival and best friend. She tried to reach him, but to no avail. I'm sorry, Urza. I'm so sorry. Why was Natsu apologizing? Wasn't she the one that decided to go through this? The roller coaster of pain was about to reach its climax. She felt it within her. She felt the differences in her body. They felt so foreign, almost as if her soul had vacated and attached itself to another body. The pain was at its pinnacle. Her voice was hoarse from all the painful screaming. The smell of burnt cloth, skin and wood wafted through the air, and distant crashing sounds reached her ears. The house was beginning to burn. Magical ceiling barrier. Gildarts Clive walked through the doors of Fairy Tale, sporting a smile that only meant one thing: he was going to celebrate by drinking. Whatever commotion was taking place within the guild died down the moment he stepped in. In silent reverence and awe, everyone stared at him, excluding 2 adults. One of the adults, the oldest of them, looked at him calmly, a kind yet surprised smile etched on his face. The other adult stared at him with indifference. "Ah, Gildarts, welcome back," spoke the diminutive older man, intently watching from his seat at the bar as Gildarts made his way over to him. "I have to say, I'm surprised the mayor didn't announce the Gildarts shift." "Ah, well, I tried to be extra careful today, master," replied the orange-haired crash mage nonchalantly, taking a seat right next to him. The old man was mostly bald, with spiky white hair sticking out from the sides of his head. He wore a plain white shirt, along with a white coat with yellow fur lining, an elegant symbol emblazoned on the back. The symbol of the 10 wizard saints. "Quite a surprise, especially coming from you, child," said the master, chuckling softly. "You're not exactly known for being a careful being." "Why is that, comma?" "Well," Gildarts hesitated slightly, something the master noticed. "I just wanted to walk through town without having people running like they're scared of me or something." It was a lie. The master knew that, knowing that Gildarts was a rather horrible liar. Still, he let it pass. Whatever the orange-haired man was hiding, it was his business if he wanted to reveal it. "You brought this upon yourself, you know," stated the master. "All that reckless destruction brought the mayor's ire upon us." Gildarts laughed raucously. "Perhaps, but at the time, my control over my magic wasn't nearly as good as it is today." The master nodded. "I concede that point, at least." "Oh, come on, Master Makarov, stop being so mean," Gildarts whined, pouting. Makarov laughed and took a swig of his mug. "Ah, that hit the spot. Anyways, how was the mission, child?" he asked. "Success, through and through." "You know me, master," replied Gildarts. Makarov nodded. "Wouldn't expect anything less from you, Gildarts." "You are the ace of our guild," stated he. "Aw, shucks. Quit it, master, you're making me blush," Gildarts joked, earning a throaty laugh from the elder man. Before another word was spoken, 2 sizable pulses of magical energy washed over them, silencing the ruckus in the guild. However, as suddenly as they appeared, they disappeared, rather abruptly and unnaturally. "What was that?" asked Master Makarov of Gildarts, but got no answer. When he turned, he was surprised to see a shocked and worried expression, almost as if he recognized the magical signatures. Just as Gildarts was about to get up, the doors burst open, and a little girl, no older than 6, rushed in, tears streaming down her visage. "Kagura!" exclaimed Gildarts, rushing and kneeling in front of the girl. "What's going on? Why did Urza and Natsu flare their magical power?" The now named Kagura tried to talk, but her sobbing prevented her from uttering a single word. The guild watched the interaction, spellbound. "Kagura, sweetie, please calm down, I can't understand a thing you're saying," tried to soothe Gildarts, though it was futile. "Natsu, Urza," she managed to get out. "Yes, what about them?" Gildarts almost demanded. Master Makarov jumped down from the stool and walked towards them, a serious expression on his face. "Fire," was all Kagura said before collapsing into another fit of sobs. "Natsu, Urza, fire," thought Gildarts, before realization struck him. "Oh no. Bolting straight up, he turned and faced the master. Master, I have to go, he stated. He then looked towards Kagura. Kagura, please stay here. The short old man is the master of fairy tale. He'll take care of you, but don't worry, kid, I'll save Natsu and Urza. I promise, Gildarts reassured. Quickly noticing the actual problem, he kneeled before her. Sweetie, he's not a bad man. I promise you, I trust him with my life. He'll protect you, trust me. After what seemed like an eternity, Kagura nodded. Gildarts sighed in relief, stood up, and rushed out of the guild. So, what the hell was that all about? Asked one of the members. Dunno, but it was mighty weird. How did Gildarts meet the little girl, though? That's what I'd like to know, replied another member. Master Makarov ignored the murmurings around him, and focused on the little girl before him. I assure you, child, that no harm will befall you with me. Everything will be okay, he spoke softly, placing his hand on the girl's shoulder. Come, let's find you a seat and get you something to drink. Little Kagura nodded once again, and followed him to a table away from the guild members. She was shaking, sniffles escaping her every now and then. Makarov, though, was contemplative. Just what are you hiding, Gildarts? Gildarts frantically rushed over to his house, a million thoughts racing through his mind. The familiar energy pulses worried him, but Kagura's tear-streaked face sent him into protective, combative overdrive. Had the children been kidnapped right under his and Fairy Tale's nose? No, that could not be the answer. There were only 2 pulses of magical energy, not a multitude of them, and the perpetrators were Natsu and Urza. What could have happened between them? He arrived at the boulevard of his house, and his eyes widened in horror. His house's windows were emitting smoke, and there was a crowd curiously looking at it, while calling for someone to alert Fairy Tale. Without any second thought, he surged forward, pushing through the people, not caring about an apology if he knocked them over. He felt his magic roaring through his veins, eager to escape and wreak havoc, but he suppressed it as he punched through the door of his home, coughing as the smoke hit him square in the face. What he saw shocked him beyond belief. The house was relatively intact, with only a few pieces of furniture catching on fire. A simple surge of his magical energy would remedy that, something that he silently did. However, that wasn't what shocked him. It was the dome of white magical energy in the middle of the living room, fraught with intricate designs and markings all around it, markings that were far too familiar. A magical sealing barrier. He carefully walked forward, raising his hand and releasing a small surge of his crash. This was Old Man Rob's trademark seal, a seal that prevented all magical energy trapped inside from being sensed externally, amongst other uses. He pressed his hand on the dome, unleashing a larger surge of his magic, completely disintegrating the seal, revealing its contents. A pungent smell of burnt flesh, cloth and wood struck him, making him cringe horribly. It was only preparation for the gruesome sight that lay before him. There, in the middle of a completely blackened floor, was Natsu, a large amount of his skin charred, his clothes burned and some of his hair lost. He was kneeling, holding a completely unharmed, unconscious Urza. Natsu, shouted Gildarts as he crouched down beside the child, looking him over to see how bad his burns were. Natsu, talk to me, Guild Arts, choked out Natsu. It was then that Gildarts noticed something happening to the pink-haired dragon slayer, something that no human in the world would be naturally capable of. Natsu was healing incredibly fast. He watched in astonishment as the burns slowly, but surely, diminished in size. Smoke emerged from the boy's skin, but it wasn't a grayish color as normal smoke. It was whiter than the clouds that adorned the sky on a sunny day. Just what is this, kid? Screamed Gildarts internally. Help, Urza, spoke Natsu, succumbing to a fit of coughs shortly afterward. He began to keel forward ever so slightly, but was caught by the orange-haired man. Damn it, Natsu. Just what the hell were you doing in here, he thought, watching as the lost hair began to grow back to its previous length. It wasn't the material damage that worried him. Only the rug and the floor were considerably damaged. He made millions of jewels per mission completed, so something as trivial as that didn't matter. It was the children that worried him. It was the rapidly healing wounds of Natsu that set his protective instincts into overdrive. It was the unconscious Urza and the events surrounding the sudden fire and casting of the magical sealing barrier that had him vying for answers when they woke. Carefully cradling both children into his arms, he rushed towards the guild, ignoring the staring citizens and his open house. The guild doors were open, something that he was thankful for. He wasted no time, ignored the calls of the members, the serious look of the master, as well as Kagura's cry of relief. Nothing mattered at the moment, only Natsu and Urza. He burst through the infirmary, momentarily surprised to see the one person that could accurately diagnose the children. It was the medic of the guild, the woman that healed his own wounds countless times before, poor Lyusica. She looked the same as before, serious, her pink hair tied in a bun, that long, flowing high-collared crimson cape with horn-like decorations. The only difference was that she was older. Guildarts she greeted in that same fashion he had grown fond of. "Poor Lyusica, I'm so glad to see you," said the orange-haired man. He gesticulated with his arms, moving the children a little. "Please, I need your help. Something strange happened to these kids while they were at my house." Her eyes widening ever so slightly at the sight of the children in his arms, she silently set forth and prepared 2 beds. She then gestured for him to lay them down, something that he did with utmost care. "Explain," she commanded. He nodded. "They were apparently caught in a fire at my home. The cause is unknown, but the girl, Urza, was left unharmed while the boy, Natsu, was severely burned. I don't know what. Just then, the door to the infirmary burst open, revealing a crying Kagura and a gravely serious Makarov. The girl tried to rush towards her bedridden friends, but she was stopped by Guildarts. "Kid, you shouldn't see this," he whispered, prompting small grunts of exertion from the purple-haired girl. But Natsu, Urza, I wanna see them," she cried in protest. She almost succeeded in freeing herself, but Guildarts was having none of it. He knelt in front of her, something that forced her to meet his eyes. "Kagura, they will be fine," but Natsu's hurt. Seeing her expression keel towards despair, he quickly added, "He will be fine, kid, I promise. He just needs a little time. After what seemed like an eternity of furious thinking, Kagura nodded, relenting in her endeavor. "Please leave," spoke poor Lyusica. "I need complete silence for the diagnosis." Nothing more was said by the men and the little girl. One by one they exited the premises, leaving the pink-haired medic to her own devices. They sat together on table away from the guild mates, wondering just who was going to start the inevitable conversation. "Well, child," asked Makarov kindly, but seriously. It wasn't every day that the ace of fairy tale brought children. In fact, this was the first time it happened. To say it piqued the master's curiosity would be a severe understatement. "What's the story?" Guildarts opened his mouth multiple times, trying and failing to utter a single syllable. He had no idea where to begin the explanation. He sat there, ransacking his brain for possible ways to begin. "Well," he began after what seemed like minutes. "I think we should get a drink." "This will be long." Makarov acquiesced in his suggestion, considering the fact that there was a little girl sitting right with them. It was not the best example to set for a little girl. "Very well, but nothing worse than a soda," he spoke, raising his hand and calling the barmaid over to them. Gildarts only nodded. The moment the barmaid left after bringing their orders, Makarov spoke. "Well, child, I'm all ears." Gildarts nodded, taking a deep breath. Here's how it goes. Darkness ruled. Deep in the recesses of a place unknown to man, in a harsh volcanic region, stood a cave. The cave was enormous, having an opening a few dozen meters tall, and width that was similar. Explosions rang every now and then, showering the area with a never-ending cloud of smoke and ash that would melt and suffocate any human that dared trespass. Lava flowed from the craters that topped the multitude of volcanoes, almost as if it were water. It ran down the mountain, melting everything it touched, releasing harsh hissing sounds whenever it touched something. Some of the lava even managed to seep from within the cave. It seemed like a desolate place, devoid of any life. But it wasn't. Deep within the cave, there was someone, alive and breathing. Inside the cave lived an enormous crimson dragon. It had a jagged, triangular head with prominent horns at the tip and the back, rows of deadly sharp teeth lining its maw, and multiple scars lining the right side. Its underside was beige, and was decorated with a multitude of scars, the most prominent one being an X-shaped scar at the center of its body. A row of large, black spikes adorned its back, ending at the very tip of its tail. The dragon was sleeping, or so it seemed, for the eyes were closed, and its breathing was slow, yet powerful. Suddenly, its eyes snapped open, revealing dark, piercing eyes with a shining yellow sclera. Growling out a yawn, it stood on its four legs, stretching out its enormous, bony bat-like wings. The cave was large enough to allow such a luxury, something that the dragon enjoyed. So, the Lacrima has found a worthy recipient of my power. Igniel, king of the fire dragons, announced his awakening to the world in a contemplative manner. Sensing the infusion of his Lacrima in a human, a girl no older than 8 with an affinity for fire magic that rivaled Rajo-san's affinity for lightning magic. He wondered how the girl managed to deal with the pain of infusing a Lacrima supercharged with his magic, to a level few dragons have even attempted. He expected the girl to have enough power to match the anomaly that was Rajo-san, an anomaly not seen since Acnologia himself. Igniel smirked. Everything was going according to plan. Now, all he needed was for Grandini to infuse a Lacrima of her magic in the girl she was raising. And the children that would save Earthland from Acnologia would be on its way to fulfilling their destiny. Or so he would have thought, had a crucial variable not made itself known so early in the equation. The plan must be modified, to account for its presence. I wanted to awaken it myself when he was ready, but it wasn't to be. No plan was error-proof. Igniel knew that very well. However, he just did not expect the being within Natsu to awaken so early in the boy's life, throwing in a wrench that could potentially turn the entire plan upside down. Igniel sighed. He hated unforeseen occurrences. Now, the plan had to be modified to accommodate the new variable. No matter, he would do it. However, he worried about the child dragon slayer, wondering what he would do when the inevitable meeting happened.